Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump announces 100% tariffs on films made outside the U.S. That's as major media companies are increasingly filming outside the country to save money. Jack Bradley tells us how it may affect the industry. Trump today also banning funding for risky virus research that some say led to the COVID-19 pandemic, why China is being called out, and how the executive order is meant to protect Americans. Iris Tao at the White House. Israeli forces launched retaliatory airstrikes against the Houthis in Yemen. Meanwhile, thousands of reservists are called out for a powerful operation in the Gaza Strip. Jason Perry reports. House Republicans have a busy week of meetings this week to push ahead what's known as Trump's big, beautiful budget bill, saying they need to deliver on the America First agenda or risk losing control of Congress during next year's midterm elections. Luis Martinez on Capitol Hill. And $1,000 to illegal immigrants who self-deport from the U.S. Arian Pazdar has the details on the new incentives for individuals who leave the country voluntarily.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump announces 100% tariffs on movies made outside the country. He says it's to revitalize America's film industry as more Hollywood movies are increasingly being filmed abroad to skirt high labor costs and taxes. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Our film industry has been decimated by other countries taking them out, and also by incompetence.
President Trump announces 100% tariffs on all movies made outside of the country.
It's a big industry, but it's an industry now that's it's really left, it's abandoned the USA, where it started.
All major U.S. media companies are increasingly filming overseas. This includes companies like Disney, Universal, and Netflix, which film in countries like the U.K., Australia, and Norway. Why? It's just simply cheaper.
I mean, I had to shoot a film for one day in L.A., and it was cheaper for me to take the whole crew and fly them to Europe and shoot for 3 days, lodge them, fly them, everything.
This has been on the rise for years as Hollywood's high labor costs and strict regulations put added pressure on movie makers.
It's become very expensive to shoot in the United States for a lot of reasons, and the U.S. doesn't have national tax breaks the way some other countries do. Australia, Canada, a lot of countries in Europe.
But it wasn't always like this. Hollywood production took a dive during the pandemic and dual union strikes in 2023. The industry has since been moving to shoot their films abroad.
And just everything out there, period, is cheaper. Getting locations, the cost of feeding people, the cost of lodging for people that you have to fly out there.
Many companies that have been fleeing Hollywood and California are filming in other states that have cheaper labor costs and higher tax incentives.
It's everything from top to bottom with the films. Not only you're not getting the incentives, why wouldn't you, if you can only get a very small incentive to shoot in California, why wouldn't you take your film, which the money in the budget is everything, take it to like a Georgia or a Texas where you're getting like these 30% tax incentives back.
California is trying to get its film industry back. Last year, Governor Gavin Newsom proposed doubling tax credits for Hollywood, up to $750 million.
The industry here is increasingly on life support, and it needs a pattern interrupt. We need a jolt. And people looking to leave, the email box the last few months has been next level, because I do think there was an expectation that things were going to turn around after some of the labor unrest, and it didn't materialize. And
fast forwarding to now, Trump says tariffs on foreign-made movies will help revitalize what's become a declining industry in the U.S.
If they're not willing to make a movie inside the United States, then we should have a tariff on movies that come in.
But the announcement draws concerns that these tariffs could backfire.
Probably prices will go up. It'll probably get more expensive to make movies.
The White House said Monday that there's been no final decisions on how to implement the tariffs on foreign-made films, but that the administration's working and meeting with film industry leaders to protect the country's national and economic security in this regard. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
President Trump signing an executive order today to ban all federal funding of risky gain-of-function research in countries like China. The administration warns that China is engaged in a bioweapons arms race that could likely endanger Americans. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent, Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. Tell us more about that executive order.
Good evening to you as well, Tiff. So just now at the White House, President Trump signed a new executive order banning all federal dollars from funding risky gain-of-function research, especially in countries like China, where the administration says lacks proper oversight of such dangerous experiments. It comes after U.S. intelligence agencies have said that it's likely that a COVID-19 pandemic came from a lab leak in Wuhan, China. And President Trump, while signing the oath today, says such a ban could have likely prevented an incident like that. Watch.
Many people believe that gain-of-function research was one of the key causes of the COVID pandemic that struck us in the last decade.
It's a big deal. It could have been that we wouldn't have had the problem we had.
Now, gain-of-function research is a type of biomedical research that enhances things, for example, like pathogens and viruses to make them more potent or change the way that they function. And the administration says gain-of-function research is one of the key causes of the COVID-19 pandemic. Meanwhile, RFK Jr., the health secretary, who is also inside the Oval Office signing today, says that countries like China in particular are engaged in a bio-arms race around the world that could potentially endanger the lives of Americans. Watch.
A lot of that research was moved offshore to the Wuhan lab. It launched bioweapons arms race all around the country, all around the world, so that China is engaged in it, developing all kinds of weapons using AI and CRISPR technologies that are really devastating.
And the White House also emphasized that the last COVID-19 pandemic cost the world 20 million lives and also $25 trillion at least. Administration says today's EO would likely prevent such incidents and protect Americans from lab accidents such as those that likely caused the COVID-19 pandemic.
And Iris, speaking of China, what's the latest with potential trade deals amid heightened tariffs?
Right, so President Trump today, earlier in the afternoon, said that China is being decimated amid his high tariffs on the country, and adding that China wants a deal badly. But he also emphasized that he wants a fair deal with China that stops China's unfair trade practices and prevents the U.S. from keep on losing when it comes to U.S. and China trade. He also said over the weekend that he expects the first trade deals to come as early as this week, and his administration also emphasized that the first trade deal could come soon with one of the top economies. Back to you.
All right, Iris, thanks for those updates. In the Middle East, Israeli forces report launching retaliatory airstrikes against the Houthi terrorist group in Yemen. At the same time, Israel says it's planning to launch powerful operations in the Gaza Strip. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
In Israel, tens of thousands of reservists were recently called up to report for duty in the Israel Defense Forces. And on Monday, vehicles were seen arriving at Israel's military recruiting drafting station, where some of them will go to check in for duty. The recent activation of troops comes after Israel's chief of the general staff said they were planning to expand operations in the Gaza Strip. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said those plans have now been approved.
Last night we convened at the cabinet until late and decided on a powerful operation in Gaza. This was the recommendation of the chief of staff, to go, as he said, to defeat Hamas. And in this way, he thinks it will also help us rescue the hostages. And I agree with him.
Israeli government spokesman David Mencer explained how this operation will differ from previous ones.
We are moving away from the method of raids going in and going out, but to expanding the territory held by our military and remaining in them to prevent Hamas from taking it back.
And an Israel Defense Forces spokesperson said that the majority of residents in the Gaza Strip will have to move once again for safety to a, quote, Hamas-free zone. And on the same day, the mother of a hostage still held in the Gaza Strip voiced her frustration to Israeli officials about the new operations.
This operation will result in the killing of hostages in captivity, will result in the deaths of those who have been kidnapped, and will bring a disappearance of the bereaved.
And she called on reservists not to report for duty, citing moral and ethical reasons before she was forced to leave the meeting. And in another development, Israeli forces reported striking targets in Yemen belonging to the Iran-backed Houthi terrorist group, including the Hodeidah port, which Israel says is used for the transfer of Iranian weapons. The strikes come just a day after the Houthis launched a missile that landed near Israel's main airport. Israel says a technical issue with its interceptor was the likely reason the missile was able to land so close to the airport. President Trump has said the U.S. will hold Iran accountable for any attacks by the Houthis, but Iran has said they aren't behind such attacks. Iran's defense minister on Monday said that if Iran is attacked, then they will target U.S. bases. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Iran says it remains committed to diplomacy with the United States. The government made the comments today after a fourth round of nuclear talks with Washington, scheduled for Saturday, was postponed for so-called logistical reasons. Iran says it is flexible regarding the timing of talks, saying it is waiting for details from mediator Oman. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said last week that Iran should import enriched uranium for its nuclear program rather than having the ability to enrich uranium at home. President Trump has threatened to bomb Iran if no agreement is reached with his administration on the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. Western countries say the program is geared towards weaponization. Iran claims its nuclear program is purely for civilian purposes. The reconciliation process keeps getting more and more complicated for the GOP leadership as House Republicans set their list of demands ahead of the markup of the big, beautiful bill. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has the details.
It seems to be Republicans always have a hard time understanding what the American people want. And the American people didn't vote for typical Republican policies. They voted for President Trump's MAGA, America First policies, and that's what they want, and they're frustrated.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene lashed out against the White House and fellow Republican lawmakers because of their foreign policy focus. On a social media post, Congresswoman Greene posted, "Every single night from small towns to big cities, people fill emergency rooms with drug overdoses. I don't care about Ukraine or Iran or Houthis or whatever foreign country I'm told I'm supposed to care about." New York Republicans like Congressman Nick LaLota and Congressman Mike Lawler have drawn the red lines when it comes to supporting the president's agenda.
My bottom line is I am not cutting benefits for eligible recipients, period. I think we ought to focus on three things. One, taking all the illegals off. Everybody should be in favor of that. Second, we should reduce from 12 to 6 months how often you have to go re-register and get your qualification checks. And then third, we should require work for able-bodied adults. You do those three things, you save about $370 billion over 10 years, and there's a lot of consensus around those three provisions.
And moderate Democrats are now taking more hawkish positions on Russia and China.
China and Russia are looking at this administration and seeing chaos. They're seeing us abandon all our alliances around the globe, and that ultimately makes us weaker and more vulnerable as Americans to countries like Russia, China, North Korea, Iran.
It's important to note that over the weekend, the White House approved a $350 million supplemental assistance package for Ukraine. Congress will have to weigh in on the military assistance package while they seek $1.5 trillion in spending cuts for the reconciliation process. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Ukraine is renewing calls for a 30-day ceasefire, saying a truce is possible at any time. Moscow, meanwhile, highlights the need for a direct meeting between the presidents of the U.S. and Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Prague today. During his visit, Zelensky renewed calls for a 30-day pause in hostilities. The U.S. initially proposed the temporary truce after a previous limited ceasefire ended. The Kremlin, meanwhile, says a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Trump is necessary. Over the weekend, Trump said he might consider meeting with Putin during a trip to Saudi Arabia this month. Trump is reportedly scheduled to visit Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE to take part in a summit with Gulf leaders. Moscow says Putin has no trips to the Middle East planned for mid-May. But according to the Kremlin, the important meeting has to be prepared properly and requires efforts at various expert levels. Coming up, $1,000 to illegal immigrants who self-deport from the U.S. Arian Pozidar has the details on the new incentives for individuals who leave the country voluntarily. And a boat wreck off the coast of San Diego leaves multiple people dead and many others injured. Authorities suspect it was part of a human smuggling operation. Christina Corona reports when we return. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump doubles down on efforts to incentivize self-deportation, offering $1,000 to illegal immigrants who self-deport. It's part of a broader push on immigration enforcement. NTD's international correspondent Arian Posdar has the details.
And we're going to get them a beautiful flight back to where they came from.
President Trump on Monday announcing a financial incentive for illegal immigrants who self-deport from the U.S. Trump says he plans to give $1,000 to individuals who choose to leave the country voluntarily. On top of that, the administration also promises to pay for travel assistance. Individuals who tell the government that they plan to return home will also be deprioritized for detention and removal. Trump says they might then be allowed to return to the U.S. in the future.
If they make it, we're going to work with them so that maybe someday, with a little work, they can come back in if they're good people. But if they don't work, and if we take them out after the date, then they're never coming back. And that's the least of the problems that they're going to have.
The administration is asking immigrants to use the CBP Home app to announce their voluntary return. The app used to be called CBP One during the Biden administration. It was used by immigrants from some countries to enter the U.S. The app has now been redesigned to assist with self-deportations. And also on Monday,
our country needs law and order.
Trump talked about his decision to reopen Alcatraz, a former maximum security prison located off the coast of San Francisco. On Sunday, the president ordered the reopening and expansion of the institution.
Bring it back in large form, add a lot. But I think it represents something. Right now it's a big hulk that's sitting there rusting and rotting.
Trump says Alcatraz can help make America safer by housing the most violent criminals. The administration plans to also include illegal immigrants who, quote, cause chaos on the streets. Border czar Tom Homan commented on Monday.
Well, we need detention beds. I think it's certainly an option, especially for the significant public safety threats, national security threats. I mean, should be on the table.
Alcatraz previously operated between 1934 and 63. During that time, it housed some of America's most notorious criminals. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Joining us now to discuss is Andrew Arthur. He's a fellow in law and policy at the Center for Immigration Studies. He's also a former immigration judge. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. Now, to begin, how significant is this move, essentially paying people to self-deport?
So there is precedent for us doing this in the past for immigrants who are in detention. We offer something called voluntary departure under safeguards, where in essence the United States government pays for the plane ticket for those individuals. They leave the United States without being deported. They can't come back legally, but if they do get a visa in the future, it makes it a whole lot easier for them to come back. And when you look at the numbers, Tiffany, this actually makes a lot of sense. The Trump administration estimates that this will cost about $4,500 per immigrant who is removed. That's, $3,500 for a plane ticket, and an additional $1,000 resettlement fee that these folks would receive in order to get their lives back in order, and of course, whatever money they've managed to make in the United States. Contrast that with about $17,000 per removal for immigrants who are deported from the United States. So from that perspective, this will save about 70% of the fees that we would have otherwise. It'll save those scarce immigration court resources we're also concerned about. And it does make good fiscal sense. I think he might get some pushback. I know that at least one Democratic senator has said, let's make these folks pay a fine instead. But really all that would do is encourage more people to come illegally in the future so that they too can pay a fine and get to stay here illegally.
On that fiscal side, White House Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller saying, quote, the savings are as much as $1 million per illegal alien family, given the long-term costs of free welfare and public support. What likely challenges are you expecting to see here, say sanctuary cities, NGOs, etc.?
Well, I can't imagine that sanctuary cities would have much objection to individuals voluntarily leaving their cities, leaving their states. Keep in mind, Tiffany, that those individuals, incur municipal costs. The cost of education per pupil is about $17,000 per year on average, higher in New York. In addition, there are also medical costs that states have to pay for emergency medical treatment, things like that. There's also housing. We have a housing scarcity in this country. Many municipalities help to, underwrite the cost of housing, so they'll be saving on that. Now, I think that there are going to be a lot of advocates in this country who want to keep these folks here, but if they want to go and the government's willing to help pay for it, they should be allowed to go.
Well, that's a perfect segue because this move does come on top of the revamped CBP One app into CBP Home, where those who entered illegally register themselves as having entered illegally and then self-deport with the chance of coming back in legally. Now, Trump's approach is novel here, but how successful do you see this being in lowering the number of illegal immigrants in the country?
I actually think it's a game changer. Many of the proposals that the Trump administration has floated include, requiring all illegal immigrants in the United States to register themselves, prosecuting individuals after the fact for having entered illegally. Those are all deterrents. People don't want to register themselves if they're here illegally, but if they have the opportunity to leave to avoid, being detained, being physically removed from the United States, that is a pretty big deal. Right now, the center estimates, and our estimate is a conservative one, that somewhere between 15 and 16 million immigrants are unlawfully present in the United States. It's probably not economically feasible to remove them all, but if you could encourage, even a quarter of those individuals to leave, we'll be at a manageable number. The country will be safer because we're going to know more or less who's here. And we'll be able to focus on the criminal aliens. Tom Homan was clipped in that earlier intro. And, it's really the criminal aliens that the president, that Mr. Homan, Secretary Noem are interested in. So if we can get, law-abiding families, out of the country, we don't have to worry about them. We won't have to use resources on them. We could focus on the highest profile individuals.
And Andrea, as a former immigration judge, what do you make of the ways this administration has been tackling the immigration issue so far?
I think they've actually done it pretty wisely. I think that in many degrees, the story has gotten away with them with respect to individuals like Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the MS-13 member who was deported, by administrative error, and some other high-profile individuals who have been active on college campuses in protests against the Israeli government. But if you look at what Tom Homan, Secretary Noem, President Trump are all doing, this is what the American people wanted. And in fact, in a New York Times Siena poll that came out last week that received a lot of attention because it wasn't particularly good for President Trump, the one thing that was good for President Trump was the deportation program. He received majority support amongst Americans for that program. It's something that he ran on. It's something that he's promised. It's something he's delivering.
Now, zooming out a bit here, one reason many argue that these people want asylum in the U.S. is safety from cartels, which are now designated a terrorist group. Given that President Trump has said that if Mexico wants help with the cartels, the U.S. would be honored. Now, Trump says he's willing to send in troops, but what do you think is more likely here? Sending in troops, drones, diplomacy?
I think drones, money, and diplomacy are probably going to be the most likely thing. Now, in the past, when Colombia, a strong ally, was faced with, cartel insurgencies, we launched something called Plan Colombia, under which billions of dollars were sent to Colombia and U.S. troops were sent to Colombia to help the Colombian government fight those cartels, and did so successfully. It was very successful. But in Mexico, it's very different because, Mexico still has memories of, American incursions going all the way back to the Mexican-American War in the 1840s. And, they're very proud of their sovereignty. They don't really want to have U.S. troops coming in. But they also want to fight the cartels. They want to fight them because, it breeds violence and corruption in Mexico, but also it's bad for the foreign relations with the United States. About 77% of all Mexican imports come to this country. And President Claudia Sheinbaum, doesn't want to have that spigot cut off because it would destroy the Mexican economy. So she wants to work cooperatively with the Trump administration. And some from reporting that I've seen, including by my colleague Todd Bensman, they've been very successful with respect to fentanyl. Fentanyl is the biggest issue. It's a deadly drug. 2 grains are enough to kill you. And the cartels are afraid of the Trump administration, and they're afraid of the Mexican government. And so they have shifted away from their fentanyl production for export to the United States, which is a good thing. That's another key promise that the president made. He had angel moms at the White House last week. And, more than a couple of their kids had died due to fentanyl poisoning. We need to get that off the streets. So Mexico's helping. I think that the president's going to, give President Sheinbaum and the Mexican government some latitude in, stemming the cartel imported drugs or exported drugs into the United States. But, he's always going to keep that military option in case he needs to use it.
Andrew Arthur, as always, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Tiffany.
At least 3 people are dead and many others injured after a suspected smuggling boat capsized this morning near San Diego. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more about the incident.
The U.S. Coast Guard says crews responded to an overturned boat near Torrey Pines State Beach around 6:30 a.m. At least 4 survivors were taken to the hospital for treatment. Coast Guard spokesperson Petty Officer Chris Sappi says 2 children were among those on board. He confirmed the vessel is believed to be part of a human smuggling operation involving migrants, not drugs. Officials report that around 18 people were found on the beach during the mass casualty incident, prompting authorities to classify the response as a major medical emergency. The exact number of passengers is still unknown. Authorities also said that the single engine was visibly damaged. The boat was over 20 feet long and had scuffed blue paint and wooden planks used as seats. Inside, investigators found a pair of running shoes, more than a dozen life vests, an empty waterproof phone case, and several water bottles. The search effort included helicopters, lifeguards on boats and jet skis, and rescue crews walking the beach. Several agencies are responding to the incident, including the U.S. Border Patrol and the U.S. Coast Guard. This is a developing story, and no details have been released on where the vessel came from or who was on board. Reporting from the city of El Monte, Christina Corona, NTD News.
Coming up, the House today unanimously passes the Falun Gong Protection Act. The act sanctions foreigners involved in forced organ harvesting in China. Arlene Richards reports. And a House committee debates a bill that would restrict funds to colleges and universities with ties to Confucius Institutes or other institutions linked to China's military, police, or intelligence activities. Jason Blair brings us the key takeaways after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The Trump administration restarted collection of defaulted federal student loans today. When the plan was announced last month, Education Secretary Linda McMahon said American taxpayers will no longer be forced to serve as collateral for what she called irresponsible student loan policies. Here's the story.
You can't just say, well, I think that'll all work itself out.
Collection of defaulted federal student loans resumes today after a 5-year pause related to the pandemic. Defaulting usually means missing payments for 270 days or more. The government says that can now lead to garnishment of state or federal benefits. It says it'll start garnishing wages this summer.
If your debt gets sent to collections, that goes onto your credit report, and that can impact your ability to get an apartment, a mortgage, a car loan, even some employers' check.
The Department of Education estimates about 5 million borrowers have defaulted on student loans. It says another 4 million are at least 90 days late on payments. Experts suggest all borrowers visit their loan provider's website to confirm their status and update their contact information. If a person is worried about defaulting, experts say they could look into an income-based repayment plan. Payment pauses, called deferment or forbearance, or consolidation or refinancing. The DOE says a person with a defaulted loan can learn their options through the Student Aid Office's Default Resolution Group. They might be able to restore their status through a process called rehabilitation.
it's time to, buckle down and figure out how you can make those payments.
Well, President Trump's proposed 100% tariffs on foreign-made films help the American film industry. And will the offer to pay illegal immigrants to self-deport expedite Trump's deportation promises? Tune in to NTD's Capital Report at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll hear analysis and insights from Republican strategist Matt Klink and Democratic strategist Josh LaFazan. A House committee discusses a bill that would limit federal funds to schools with connections to Confucius Institutes, or what they are calling Chinese entities of concern. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
The House Committee on Rules is discussing the DHS restrictions on Confucius Institutes and Chinese Entities of Concern Act. The bill would restrict funding to an institution of higher education that has a relationship with either a Confucius Institute, Thousand Talents program, and or, quote, Chinese entity of concern. The bill defines a Chinese entity of concern as, quote, generally any university or college in China that is involved with the Chinese military, police, or intelligence activities.
The CCP exploits the open and collaborative nature of American academia to conduct widespread industrial and military espionage inside the United States. The GAO found that 43 out of 74 schools surveyed still maintain a relationship with an entity that supported their previous Confucius Institute.
The issue of Confucius Institutes in America seems to be a largely settled issue. Congress has taken multiple steps over the years to limit the presence of these institutions on American campuses. And by most accounts, those efforts have worked.
And the committee is also discussing the Gulf of America Act. This bill would officially rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America through Congress, putting it into law. All federal agencies would be required to update their maps and documents.
In short, this legislation recognizes the strategic influence America has over this geography, not to mention the existing economic, cultural, and commercial might that we passively exert on the Gulf.
This bill to rename the Gulf of Mexico is a stupid, unserious waste of time and taxpayer dollars.
President Trump signed an executive order to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America on his first day in office. The order is currently in effect and federal agencies are instructed to use it. However, some House Republicans say that an act of Congress renaming the Gulf would put Trump's actions into law and carry more weight. Both bills need to pass the House Rules Committee and eventually a full House vote. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
The House, by a unanimous voice vote today, passed the Falun Gong Protection Act. It aims to impose sanctions on foreign nationals who directly or indirectly participate in the involuntary harvesting of organs in China. It's one of several China-related bills debated in the House today. NTD's Arlene Richards has the highlights.
After a floor debate, the House on Monday passes the Falun Gong Protection Act by a voice vote.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1540? Those in favor, say aye. All opposed? It's an opinion of the chair that 2/3 being affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed without objection.
The act imposes sanctions on foreigners involved in forced organ harvesting of religious prisoners in China. Sponsor of the bill, Representative Scott Perry, said he introduced the bill to confront the most egregious, barbaric, medieval human rights atrocities of our current time.
As we stand on the precipice of this vote, I ask you to join me in taking a stand against the Chinese Communist Party's systematic persecution of Falun Gong practitioners. Since the early 1990s, the Falun Gong, a spiritual practice rooted in the principles of truth, compassion, and tolerance, has been targeted by the Chinese Communist Party. By 1999, Mr. Speaker, an estimated 70 to 100 million people, roughly 5 to 7% of China's population, were practicing Falun Gong. This popularity triggered a brutal response from the CCP, unleashing a campaign of illegal detentions, forced labor, torture, and most horrifically, forced organ harvesting, a practice that amounts to mass murder. On July 20th, 1999, the CCP detained hundreds of thousands of Falun Gong practitioners and banned their practice outright. Since then, the persecution has only intensified.
Florida Representative Brian Mast said the House has been raising alarms about organ harvesting for decades. He explained the Chinese Communist Party's methods.
These detainees, often imprisoned for their beliefs, are subjected to medical procedures that other prisoners are not. Blood draws, organ examinations, ultrasound scans. These are not for their health. These are the results, are then entered into a database, turning them into a human inventory for a state-run organ harvesting system. This is barbaric. These crimes, they are abuses by the Chinese Communist Party, and I think we can all agree that they have to come to an end.
In an interview with the Epoch Times after the vote, Perry explained why the vote was important.
We know the reports are out there. We know that the numbers don't add up. Everything points to what they're doing. But it's been too easy for all countries, including the United States, to just turn a blind eye to what we're pretty confident is happening, which is horrific. This ends that. This says no more ignoring it, no more looking the other way, no more just letting it go while you continue to buy communist Chinese goods and services. No more of that.
The House vote is just the first step in the act's journey to becoming a law. It next goes to the Senate for a vote and then to the president's desk. Perry had a message for the Senate.
For any senator that says no, we want to know why you approve of forced organ harvesting. Like we want to know that answer. What's the reason for being against it? Is there some good reason? If you're worried about China, the relations of America with the Communist Party of China, are you then telling everybody in the world you're okay with them killing people and taking their organs out just because they can? We really need to know.
The House also heard debate on the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act. They are expected to vote on that later this evening. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up in the NBA playoffs, Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors are into the second round thanks to a record-tying performance yesterday. Tate Martin joins us to discuss after the break. Spectators fill the streets of London to commemorate the end of World War II. A 1,300-strong military parade with an accompanying band marched through the British capital, with the spectacle topped off by a Royal Air Force flyby. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more on this for us.
Thousands of people lined the roads of central London, from the Houses of Parliament to Buckingham Palace, and are greeted by the royal family. They mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe, known as VE Day or Victory in Europe Day. After Big Ben tolled at the stroke of noon, actor Timothy Spall recited the victory speech that Britain's wartime leader Winston Churchill delivered to a roaring crowd on May 8, 1945.
This is not a victory of a party or of any class. It's a victory of the great British nation as a whole.
The cenotaph, Britain's War Memorial, was covered with Union Jack flags for the first time since it was unveiled by King George V in 1920, 2 years after the end of World War I. About 1,300 members of the British Armed Forces paraded through the city, including soldiers on horseback and military bands. Joined by troops from the UK's NATO allies and Ukraine, the British government said it symbolises the global support for their continued fight for freedom against Russia. The procession started in Parliament Square and swept past Buckingham Palace, where King Charles III took the salute, joined too by Prime Minister Keir Starmer and over 30 World War II veterans. Spectators said they wanted to commemorate those who gave their lives to fight the war.
And we're very proud of that moment, what they've done for us, and we're all proud of them, and we will always remember them.
I'm from Ghana. We came to help, and we have all the Commonwealth country came to help. That's why I'm here. So I'm here for the celebration of VE Day.
Couldn't miss it. Got to be here for this. 80 years. Got to celebrate everything that they did for us, really, haven't we? So that's why we're here.
The spectators awaited the Royal Air Force, or RAF, flyby, including the Lancaster, the most successful RAF heavy bomber in the Second World War. and the iconic Red Arrows, formerly known as the Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team, who provided the colourful finale to the flyby. Since the Red Arrows' first season in 1965, they have performed almost 5,000 displays in 57 countries. 99-year-old World War II veteran Dennis Bishop attended the flyby rehearsal last Wednesday. He was a leading aircraftman with the Royal Air Force and saw active combat in Europe and Africa.
And I'm absolutely overwhelmed with all of this because although I'm nearly 100, you know, and it's gradually fading away now, but this has brought it all back to me again now.
Britain started its commemorations of VE Day 3 days early because Monday is a public holiday in the UK. May 8 is observed by many countries including Britain, France and the United States as the date when the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany took effect in 1945. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News.
Now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start with the NBA playoffs as the Golden State Warriors pulled off a Game 7 win last night in Houston to advance to the second round. Now, players credited a players-only meeting for their win.
Yeah, players were definitely not happy after their Game 6 performance on Friday where they lost at home. It definitely showed last night. They played with a sense of urgency, really, especially on defense. They got to those loose balls. They got to a lot of rebounds. Plus, Buddy Hield had a huge game there. 33 points, tied a Game 7 record with 9 3-pointers. Now, he did most of his damage in the first half. That's kind of where Steph Curry was kind of struggling there. Curry, though, would heat up after halftime there. Let's actually listen to what Warriors coach Steve Kerr said after the game.
Much respect to the Rockets and their staff and their organization. They have a great team and they had a great season. Couldn't be more proud of our guys. That was an incredibly impressive display of resolve, discipline. The defense was fantastic. The ball security, kind of game plan discipline, followed to a T, and then multiple guys stepping up. Buddy Hield, I don't know what to say. I mean, that was really incredible watching him light it up. In that first half especially, and then down the stretch as well. But I can't say enough about our guys and what they were able to do in this series and to pull this thing out on the road in Game 7. Pretty impressive.
It was being in the zone is very spiritual. You know, just you and that rim and the net and the ball, and you just freaking it out. And sometimes you put anything up and it just goes in. But just being at peace with your game.
Yeah, so Hield definitely was in the zone last night, 9 out of 11 from three-point land. So anyway, Golden State now does a quick turnaround to play Minnesota. Game 1 will be Tuesday night.
There was some high praise right there. While elsewhere in the playoffs, the Nuggets beat the Clippers Saturday night in another Game 7. They'll play the Thunder tonight in Game 1. Who do you like in that series? Yeah,
Tiff, I like the Thunder in this series, probably every series. I mean, they had the best record in the league, 68-14. That's actually one of the best records of all time. They also had the highest scoring differential in NBA history this year. Now, this would be a very interesting series here. Thunder and Nuggets. You got the two MVP candidates, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of Oklahoma City and Nikola Jokic of Denver. Now, they finished 1-2 last year with Jokic winning it. This year, I think it could be reversed. I think Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to win it. So the Game 1 tonight, that starts at 9:30 Eastern Time. And then we'll also have Game 1 between the Knicks and Celtics here. That one starts at 7 o'clock Eastern Time between the Knicks and the Celtics. So 2 good NBA playoff games tonight here.
Well, shifting gears to the NFL, the league will hold their annual draft in Washington, D.C. with the announcement being made in the White House today. What is the significance of where the event is being held?
You know, it's really a business thing. You know, for whatever city hosts it, you're going to bring a lot of fans in. It's going to bring a lot of money. We saw last weekend more than 600,000 flock to Green Bay, Wisconsin for that 3-day event. The year before, 750,000 went up to Detroit to see it. So let's actually listen to what President Trump said about it, along with NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell today at the White House.
I'm pleased to reveal that the 2027 NFL Draft. That's a big thing. Will be held right here in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., on the National Mall, and you get a little glimpse of it. Every year, hundreds of young football players have their dreams come true as the NFL teams across the land, and you just saw that last week. Select the best young players in America to join their ranks. Hundreds of thousands of football fans will travel all across our country to cheer them on in person. We expect, would you say, more than 100,000 people, I think. What is the capacity would you think it can hold? Because the mall can actually hold up to 1 million people. If you go all the way back, what do you think?
Over 3 days, we'll be over 1 million.
Oh yeah, you're going to be.
So yeah, Goodell there said over 1 million people he thinks could attend. I mean, that would be a record. Although the number of people that goes to these things seems to go up every year. Now, of course, this is a 3-day event. Like he said, it's going to be held on the National Mall there, where the Washington Monument stands. This is for 2027.
A lot of eyes there for sure, Dave. As always, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. Round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.